Hello, everybody. Welcome to the broadcast today. I hope you can hear me all right. And I'm sure there will be some folks joining us as we're getting started. I'm sorry we're just a few minutes late. Had a little technical difficulty, but we got that resolved. We wanted to have a little different lighting, so I hope my thinning hair up there isn't too bright for you. Tonight on the broadcast, I'm hoping to um, get some of your questions and answer some of those. I already have some questions now um, that I'm going to uh, be asking, and or that I've already been asked, that have been sent ahead of time. My wingman, Mark, who would be helping me tonight, he's not going to be here for about 30 minutes. So if you could hold off on your questions for about 30 minutes, and then if you have some short questions that you'd like to um, send my way to answer, you could put a capital question in your chat and then ask the question. That way we can see the questions more easily. We know that they are questions that they are questions and not comments. Sorry for the little movement of the camera here, but I wanted to get it in a good spot. Last time the camera was way too high, and this time hopefully it's a little more where we can see one another. I do have some questions that I can answer that people have sent in, or I could wait and maybe present a few things which might get some conversation going for me to present the material. Thank you, Mark. And so I think I'll go ahead and present some ideas around self-abandonment, which is our topic tonight, reducing self-abandonment. I see we have a first-time visitor here tonight, which is great. I hope that, again, you'll be patient with me, and I'll try to answer some questions tonight when Mark can get in here and help me spot those questions so we don't miss them. It's difficult to keep talking with you and also watch all the live chat. So let me begin with tonight's topic of reducing self-abandonment, which I think is a very important topic, and I have some interesting things to share about abandonment and about reducing self-abandonment. Let me first share some notions and some ideas about, we know self-abandonment is happening when what happens? How do we know we're self-abandoning? And people have asked me that, though I think a lot of people kind of intuitively know when they're self-abandoning, because it's a way in which they we also can call it a process of de-selfing. When we don't value, when we are not aware, and we do not stand up for and do not care for ourselves in interactions with other people. And we will abandon ourselves time and time again. Now, why this topic has always been so important for me is helping me to overcome fear of abandonment. I would read things about fear of abandonment, and I'd go through what they would share in terms of how you fix that. But I didn't see them focusing on self so much. And I really felt that self-focus was very important for healing abandonment. I think oftentimes when we feel a fear of abandonment, we are often fearing self-abandonment. And that's what keeps fear of abandonment going, and it keeps it fueled. So how do we know when we're self-abandoning? Well, we may absorb others and not observe others. In other words, we just get absorbed into whatever they're saying, they're doing, their feelings, and we take in everything that's going on. Their anger, their frustration, their guilt, their whatever, we just take it right on in. Everything when it becomes personal, then we have often abandoned ourselves once it's become personal, because we're not putting up a protective layer to keep that from being personal and not taking it in. And when you don't have that barrier up there that's healthy, it's not going to help us when I take that something personal from someone else. And just like I've talked about, when someone calls you stupid, lazy, you're not loved. I was talking with a client today, and she really had abuse from a sister, and it was sibling abuse, and it was pretty excessive. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of struggles in her family, and this sister really did cause lots of problems in the family. I did want to ask at this point, I'm using this particular microphone. Can you tell me, can you hear me well with this microphone? Can I see a few comments on there if people can hear me well? Because I'd like to know how the sound is. Since I can't hear the sound, I don't have a monitor to hear that. And a couple of people said, yes, it sounds good and great. And because I know sound is very important. So when we absorb and not observe, that's a real problem. And because observing, we are more detached, more autonomous, more independent. When we focus on the other and we monitor them, not us, that's another way of saying it. In other words, we just abandon our own self-monitoring. We abandon our own self-awareness. We are in relationships and we just go, I don't care what I'm feeling. I don't care what I'm thinking. It doesn't matter what's going on with them. That's what matters. And then we just kick ourselves to the curb or leave ourselves in the corner and just go off and try to interact with other people. And then we feel abandoned, and then that continues to reinforce the abandonment. When we enmeshment is a self-abandonment. Enmeshment is a de-selfing. And I've talked a lot about enmeshment and how we overlap with other people. We don't have a real solid cellular membrane, because I'm a cell, I'm an organism, and me, Jerry, self has its own organism, and I should have a protective shell. Now it is permeable. In other words, I want to interact with other people, and they're bridges to other people. I want to love other people. I want their love to come in. But I need to have a real sense of self. Or I've used the tennis court analogy. I want to have my side of the tennis court. You can have your side of the tennis court. I have mine. And we play this game back and forth and send the tennis ball back and forth between us. But I still have my side and you have your side, and there's a net in between us. But actually, we can talk to each other. The net is porous, but we hit the ball over the net so that we can play together as adults. But you should not come on my side, and I should not come on your side. I need to respect your side. You need to respect my side. And if I value myself, I will value those things. And if I'm selfing rather than de-selfing, I will definitely value people having respect for me, and that there's a net between us and should be. And that's totally appropriate, mature, and adult. And whether they believe that or not, it doesn't. It doesn't matter whether they believe that or not. And I think that's what's very important. Oftentimes we have a hard time believing what we truly believe because we're worried or we're fearful others won't agree with us or believe us. And I was again talking to a client today, and she was having that hard time because her family was always diminishing, checking her on when she would complain about her childhood, which was actually horrendous. And her sister was quite brutal and awful. And that her family would minimize that and say, oh, well, that was then, this is now. Why are you worried about that now? No, that never happened that way. We can't imagine that happened. And so she grew up with, I'm not sure I should believe my own beliefs. I'm not sure I should believe my own eyes. I'm not sure I should believe my own ears, my own smell, my own touch, my own thoughts. I shouldn't believe that because nobody else believes it or they minimize it. So therefore, I shouldn't believe it, or there must be something wrong with me. No, there's not something wrong with you. It's that your beliefs challenge the enmeshment and the super self of the family or the relationship. Could be a marriage relationship. And if you're enmeshed or if you share a super self, and those of us who are dysfunctional and immature, we will share a super self in a marriage. Your beliefs may go against that super self. In other words, they may believe something different than you do, and that can't be tolerated. So you need to get in line. And by the way, I wanted to share with everyone, if you could hold off your questions for another 20 minutes or so, and then put question on there so we know it's a question. Mark will come in and catch those so I can get them to you, or I can answer or respond to them. I said enmeshment with others is a de-selfing and a self-abandonment. Being emotionally cut off from others is also self-abandonment. Let's say I feel embarrassed because I did something foolish regarding a friend years ago, and we fell out in terms of our friendship. And so they're walking on the other side of the street. I realize they're walking towards me. And so out of either shame or guilt or non-self-acceptance, out of my immaturity, I'm going to cut off from this person. So what am I going to do? I'm going to walk to the other side of the street so I can avoid them. Even that is self-abandonment. I realize I would feel uncomfortable. Excuse me. I realize I would feel uncomfortable confronting them, or even just walking by. And if they say nothing, I could say nothing. If they say hi, I could say hi and walk on. I don't have to have a heavy conversation about what happened 15 years ago. That's not required. Well, what if they have something nasty to say? Then I'm prepared to go, hey, I'm very sorry. Hope you have a good day. If it was my fault or if it was then I am accepting me and I'm not abandoning me. So enmeshment and cutoff both are self-abandoning. And so we don't want to cut off. And it takes courage to do that. I would advise you read Brene Brown's books on courage and all of those things, which is what she's talking about, how to have that courage to do that. The courage to be yourself, the courage to believe your own beliefs and believe your own reality, and the courage to not cut off from others and not enmesh with others. And she does a good job of explaining that. Then triangulating with others is another way to abandon self. Now you say, well, how would I be doing that? If I'm triangulating, how am I abandoning self? Well, because when Mary or let's say men, we'll go men, if Bob and Fred are mad at each other, then Fred comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm so mad at Bob because he's such a jerk." You know he's such a jerk. And I want you to not talk to him ever again. And I go, "Well, I don't like Bob either. And he's been a pain. Okay, I won't talk to him." Well, now I've agreed in a triangulated form to block Bob out, having never talked to Bob. Bob wasn't the one who made the comments to me. But now I've gotten myself involved, and I've just abandoned Jerry for the sake of comfort, compliance, or I'm what's the word? I'm accommodating Fred, rather than going, "Well, Fred, I don't know. Um, I don't know what Bob did. I have known Bob to make inappropriate comments. I know he can do that, but occasionally I do too. But Bob, maybe more often he does that. But maybe Fred, you should go and talk to Bob about that." And I don't feel comfortable, given what you've just said, for me just to never talk to Fred again. That just doesn't feel right to me. And if I say I won't, then I'm caught in a catch-22 of Bob doesn't know why I'm not talking to him. And if I'd ever talk to him because I don't feel it's a big issue that I don't talk to him, then Fred, you're going to be mad at me. So everybody loses. So I need to stand up for myself and self-care and not abandon myself. And so I'm going to do that. And again, I know Bob could be hurtful, and maybe he hurt Fred's feelings. Maybe he really did. And that's fine, Fred. You need to go and talk to Bob and sort that out. Or you may want to decide Bob's not a good friend for you. But that doesn't mean Bob should not be any kind of acquaintance to me or any kind of relationship to me. And if you consider that disloyal, then you're over on my side of the tennis net, or I'm over on your side of the tennis net, and I don't want to be there. I get to decide who I'm going to be friends with or have a relationship with. I'm not denying that Bob did anything wrong. He may have done something very wrong. And if he ever talks to me about it and says, "I want to ask you, Jerry, about this. I kind of treated Fred this way." I might say, "Well, that doesn't sound very kind. I don't think that's such a good idea. It's too bad you did that. I can understand why Fred might not want to talk to you anymore." I might give him that advice. And then I'm not abandoning Jerry for the sake of this relationship. Because true friends don't ask you to do that. Because true friends respect your decision. Now, Fred can come to me and say, "Oh, Jerry, I want to tell you, I've made a decision. I've made a decision that I'm not going to really be hanging out with Bob anymore." And I would say, "Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but if you say that's been a struggle or a problem, then I understand and I respect that. You have that right to do that. But if I want to spend time with him, I can, and I'm going to, and because my relationship is not the same as your relationship. That doesn't mean I don't have similar values that you have, but I may have a different relationship with Bob. Bob may not treat me that way. And maybe he will, maybe, I don't know. And if he does, then I'll make whatever choices I have to make then. But I'm not going to make them because of what you're saying. And so now that gets a little trickier if you're married and you have shared life. That gets, then we'd have to talk about what that means. But I can't go into all that tonight. That's a whole nother. What do you do if you have shared life and you have those triangles? Then it gets trickier. Another way we self-abandon is we leave ourselves, when we leave ourselves needless or wantless. And what I mean by that is we just assume I have no needs, I have no wants, and shouldn't, or ought not, or they're bad, and we just leave ourselves wantless and needless. We have no needs. We have no wants. When we do that, that abandons us. Just because I have a need or a want doesn't mean they all need to be met and the wants all need to be provided. But it's good to know what my self-awareness is about those things, and that I do have needs and I do have wants, because that can guide you in relationships. We need to use that information to guide us. Many of us have grown up, and just like the client I talked to today, who had a very dysfunctional family and abusive siblings and neglectful and painful parents, needs and wants were not something that she had. And what I might ask her, well, what do you need? What do you want? It's like, oh, I don't even know. I hadn't even thought of that. And again, when we are needless and wantless, then we are going to feel that self-abandonment. And that's us doing it to us. I realize we learned it, and I realize it's a part of our family of origin. I realize there are other people involved in the making of this problem. So I'm not denying that. And I'm going to get to what do we do about healing some of these things here in a minute. But when that's a self process, which is what it's become, we've internalized, and just like this client today, internalized her sister's abuse. Guess what she does to herself? She becomes the sister who gives herself a hard time and abuses herself. And I'll talk about that. We also, if we have had abandonment, there's been that's when we abandon ourselves. We refuse to love, accept, and care for us. We do we do refuse to do those things, and that equals self-abandonment. And we refuse, or when we have neglect, and when we neglect ourselves, we have internal neglect, where we will have where we don't know what we want or need. That's internal neglect. Where we don't know what we choose, we don't know what we believe, we don't care for ourselves, we don't give ourselves what do I want to say? Pleasure. We don't give ourselves the self-care that we need. And so we find ourselves with internal neglect. Then we have abuse, where we can actually abuse ourselves. And that's where we become very, very negative about I see that we have some trolls here. I don't know. Let me take a look here. If I can. Let's see if I can change that. Because we've got. Yeah, we'll get rid of that, I think. And I will also oops. Yeah, we've got some who are acting crazy. Okay, I think that might be better. Sorry for that, guys, and I don't know that we have someone who's monitoring that tonight. I do see another. Oh, there's Rinda, and she has a wrench, so that's helpful. Yes, we have trolls who've got to say crazy things. And that's the world that we live in, and that's going to happen. Getting back to the physical abuse or abuse that's internal, where we will really turn on ourselves and be very abusive to ourselves and calling ourselves names, worthless, um, uh, you know, why should I even be alive? You're so stupid. No one will love you. And then we continue those messages on ourselves, to ourselves. And so we want to begin to resist and to stop that. And then some even take it to physical abuse um, because um, the they will actually do things to harm themselves physically, and that's just a mirroring of um, that is a mirroring of what we experienced growing up, and then we do it to ourselves. So we internalize that and then do it to us. So when you have those negative things that are happening, like I mentioned, neglect, abuse, emotional internal abuse or neglect, or physical abuse of yourself, those are an internalization of things that that happened to us long ago. And the good news is we do have some control over those, and we can begin to resist those and to really begin to heal in those areas. It takes some work, but that's why Brene Brown talks about that courage that we have to have, and she does talk about it being work. It really is a road less traveled. Um, and if you really want to change these things, it does require effort, resistance, and persistence to change in those things, because these things have become very much a part of our subjectivity and a part of our paradigm. However, we do want to challenge them, and we might want to write some things out so that we can know what those messages are, so that we can be ready and attuned to resist them. Um, Unhealthy risk taking and addictions is another self abandonment. We will look for external means to lift our low self esteem, our low self image, our low self acceptance, and we'll look to external things to make us feel better. But that's a self abandonment. Now, you might say, well, Jerry, how is that a self abandonment? How would that be a self abandonment? Because you don't fix self esteem by external things. You don't fix low self image by external things. It's an internal process we have to fix. Now, am I against having relationships or buying a new outfit or buying a nice house? Or no, there's nothing wrong with those things. They just can't be a replacement for self and for feeling good about you. And that's why I think it's self abandonment when we ignore that and then go do those extra external things. Another thing we can do to self abandon is to not listen to our bodies, not listen to our pain. We just ignore it. Um, we just ignore it, and we say, it doesn't matter what my body feels. It doesn't matter what my pain is saying. We don't listen to ourselves. In fact, many times we might even tell ourselves to shut up. And I would rather you tell the negative messages and the internal neglect, internal abuse, and those kinds of things to shut up, not your legitimate, reasonable body experiences and pain. We don't want to tell us to shut up in that way. Another way we might self-abandon is by denying what we know is true about our past or our lives or our present. When we deny it, then we're just abandoning ourselves when we deny that. And let's see here. And so a lot of people will deny that. A lot of people will not accept what they know to be true. And again, like the client that I talked to today, her siblings were very much in denial about what had happened to her when she grew up, though they all kind of knew it happened, but they just, oh, mom and dad would be upset, or, don't rock the boat. Don't do anything like that. You just need to stay quiet. And your sister's husband tried to come on to me in the past. You just keep quiet about that, because just think what problems that would cause. And when we do that, we just throw ourselves in the trash bin and go, okay, okay, that's a real problem. That I should just go, okay, whatever will make everybody happy in the family. And usually what that means is everybody gets happy but me. Everybody is comfortable but me. And I really think that we have to begin to think of ourselves. And I don't mean in a selfishness way. I mean we have a deficit of self, and to bring self up to a normal baseline level. I'm not talking about an over focus on self. I'm talking about a healthy. And many have grown up in which it was not healthy, and they did not accept themselves. So how are we doing time wise? I think Mark's going to join us here, and maybe we'll be able to get some questions in. And I have a few questions I want to answer. I have some statements and some things I want to share about, what do we do about self-abandonment? And I'll save that so that you can hang on, and I will share some of those things that might be of help. And I think there's some good points and maybe some points you hadn't thought of about reducing self-abandonment. So let me go to a few questions I got on email, because when I send out my information or talk about we were having the talk tonight, I did say, hey, if anybody's got short questions, please send them to my email address. And this one, I won't use her name. Z is her first name. My question: how do I learn to enjoy my solitude, being able to be alone and not to need other people to enjoy life? And I think that's a great question. How do you enjoy solitude? I think that's a very good question, and I think there's some, and I think maybe I would change the question give an answer by changing the question. My question: how do I learn to enjoy me, being able to be with me and not need others to enjoy my life? I think whenever we say solitude, that we're talking about us. And if you're not happy with you, if you don't like being with you, if you don't like you, if you self-abandon you, I'm telling you, you're not going to be happy with you and being alone with you. And the other people have been a distraction. We need other people to be happy. Now, am I saying we should not connect with other people? Of course we want to connect with other people. Of course other people bring us joy. And that's appropriate. Relationships, marriages, um, friendships, other people bring us joy. And we need that connectedness as well. But what most of us have is we go into those kinds of relationships, but we don't have enough self love. We don't have enough self acceptance, self comfort. We're not comfortable with ourselves. We don't even like ourselves. And then we wonder, why do I need all these people around me to feel so I don't feel alone? Well, they're just distraction from how you feel about yourself. And so we want to work on that sense of self. Can I come to love me? Can I come to like me? Can I come to accept me? Can I even have fun with me? All those kinds of things. Can I have pleasure with me and me alone, and do things that I would like to do? And then out of that me-ness, not selfishness, but self-care, self-differentiation, sense of self, I then share that with other people. Then I'm not lonely in the crowd, nor am I lonely at home. It avoids that loneliness. Because I remember it was very common when I did not like me at all and did not care for me, I could be lonely in a crowd. And being in a large number of people who might think I'm as great as sliced bread, and I'm wonderful. I still felt very alone. Well, why would that be if I've got everybody around me who wants to be my friend? And when I was a pastor and a bishop in the church, and everybody wanted to be near me, but I didn't want to be near me. That's the problem. And so I can be alone in a crowd. I can feel alone by myself. It's the loneliness and aloneness that I need to fix, and how I feel about me. Can I be okay and not be alone? Excuse me. Can I be okay while being alone with me? And boy, that's a challenge. But it's the way out of that dilemma. Now, I have another question. And Jerry, I have two questions. This is Jay. And how do I know if it's my frustration or the frustration of the other person that I am absorbing because we are enmeshed? And that's question one. Well, I think it probably is fairly clear that it's your frustration, but it may have systems functioning. In other words, maybe they're feeling frustrated. I would guess it's more that they want you to feel frustrated. In other words, it's your frustration, but that is being used in the system for you to do a certain thing and be a certain way. Look at the systemic purpose of the frustration or the feeling. In other words, I've told people, if you feel angry, how do you think the system benefits from you being angry? If you feel frustrated, how does the system benefit by you being frustrated? If you feel confused, if you feel hurt, if you feel shamed, how does the system benefit from that? Or the family, or the relationship, or the marriage? And so we want to look at the system's reason why I'm having these internal feelings, because many times there can be a very good clue as to why it's there. And a lot of people will focus on, I just want to get rid of the frustration. Well, I don't blame them. Frustration is not fun to have. And I don't blame them for wanting to get rid of it. However, it would be even better if I knew what role it played in the system, and I could look at a larger perspective and heal myself within the system so that I wouldn't have to feel that frustration again, because more than likely I will if I'm only focusing on what is happening inside me. If I take it to a broader understanding, then there will be more awareness of what's going on with that frustration or guilt. Or, if I feel guilty and it's within the marriage, within a family, within a friendship, within the church, whatever it is, if I feel guilty, is this truly healthy guilt? Or is this guilt because it serves the system in a certain way, but doesn't necessarily serve me? And I think those are good questions to ask when we are asking how we're enmeshed with someone, Jay. And then, can I reduce self abandonment by speaking up in a calm way? Well, you can speak up in a calm way, which I always think is a good idea to do that. What you really want to focus on is speaking up in a calm way about your own sense of your I position. It's interesting. I just found an old audio tape in which I did a whole workshop on I positions. And I'm going to be turning that into digital, and then maybe I can get it up for everyone, because I think it was a really good time talking about I positions. That you want to talk and speak up in a calm way, expressing your own wants and needs, your own perspective, and not weaponizing it. We don't need to weaponize it. If we weaponize our speaking up, then we're abandoning ourselves again, because we're going to be triggering the whole system against us. And why would we need to or want to do that? Now, I understand if I'm calm while speaking up and talking about, myself, and someone gets upset, well, there's nothing I can do about that. But if I speak up and weaponize it, then there's going to be a lot of blowback that I caused, even though they are not healthy. And I understand they're not healthy and may be overreactive. But I could have changed my part of the feedback mechanism or feedback loop. I got a question from G. And she writes another question. And by the way, I think Mark is now joining us, and I think he's maybe working on questions. And she states, I'm weighing the pros and cons of staying married to an alcoholic, pot addicted, and narcissistic spouse. I think I would weigh the pros and cons of that. On the other hand, he has many positives, and that's very true and often can happen. I use gratitude to get me through each day. I have a great lifestyle, and if I leave, I know my life will change drastically, and I will lose all the benefits of being married to this person. Why am I so attached to this security of being married and nice lifestyle, excuse me, at the expense of my emotional life? What is it with me? He cycles, and with his cycles, my decisions to stay or go changes. Generally, I know I should leave, but cannot follow through. I've been in therapy for this for years. And, G, you're not alone in that whole dilemma. There are a lot of folks, men and women, who are caught in relationships, and when they feel it's abusive, yet on the other hand, there are some positives in the relationship, and it would be very costly and very difficult if they're financially dependent to make that exit. That would be very hard because there are some advantages to doing that. I would recommend Marjalis Fjellstad, Fjelstad, Margalis, her book on healing from a narcissistic relationship, and also Stop Caretaking the Borderline or Narcissist. She's a marriage and family therapist who writes really well about narcissism. And I would recommend her books to you to sort through that and about staying or going. And she really does a good job in a very mature way, talking about should you stay or should you go. And I might also suggest, when I hear something like this, and I realize that you have some self abandonment there with, why do I keep all this at the expense of my emotional life? Well, there may be a deficit of liking you. There might be a deficit of that. And that one way to maybe take a look at it, while your husband or your spouse can be a real alcoholic, pot addicted, and narcissistic person, um, the probably the reasons you stay are not so much about your spouse. And you may want to take a look at, how does your life with your family of origin set you up for this conflict and dilemma? And that's where we use the phrase, the solution is not near the problem. In other words, if we're looking at, okay, I'm going to try to do the pros and cons. Okay, he's alcoholic, pot addicted, narcissistic, but he has many positives. And I use gratitude to get through. I have a great lifestyle, financially good or whatever. And the security being married. And, I have all those pros and cons. Now, when you have all those pros and cons done, I don't know if that will provide you with the answer. It could help you see what's really going on, and that's a good thing. We want to see clearly what's going on, but it may not resolve, should I go or should I stay? That's probably something that's deeper or more unconscious, and more go back to your family of origin. What sets you up to be in this relationship? And that's where I would look, because what I've found is when people go back and resolve those issues and the stuckness they had in their family of origin and still have today stuck in their family of origin, once they resolve that, the relationship with their spouse becomes much clearer and much more neutral, much more detached. And then they can make a more healthy decision for themselves, or manage to deal with the situation in a different way. So I hope that helps, G. Um, let's see. That's a. I have. Yeah. This is from R. Hello, Jerry. I don't know how to respond to someone that is projecting their issues onto me without engaging and going crazy or going to crazy town. How can I not justify, argue, defend, or explain myself? Well, this is an interesting question because it's one of those how questions. Sure, there are some things that we can work on to maybe increase our self-differentiation. But this is more of a when question than a how question. When are you going to choose you and not justify, not argue, not defend, and not explain yourself? That's a choice you can make when the time is right. When someone cannot project their issues onto you without your permission. So I want you to know, someone cannot project their issues onto you without your permission. They can project their issues onto you, but not in you without your permission. Because if someone were come to me and say, Jerry, I just don't know why you're mad at me all the time. I just think you're a narcissist and you just have never treated me right. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's a tragedy. Uh, I hope that you will feel better about that over time. It has not been my perception that that is what I've been doing to you. Now you may differ in how I feel about that, and that's okay. You can differ. And if you notice, they can't make that go inside me unless I let them. And if I let them, then it's going to be a problem because now we're going to get locked horns. And they're reactive, then I become reactive. Then they're reactive, then I'm going to become reactive, and it's going to be really technicolor fireworks. And so just because someone is reactive or projecting or transference doesn't mean you have to go to crazy town. What you want to do is focus on staying calm, observing, not absorbing, being confused if necessary. Well, that's confusing, Mary. I didn't know that's how you felt. I'm glad you shared that with me. Okay, what did you want to have for lunch? Because it's of no importance to me. I'm not saying she's of no importance to me. I'm saying her beliefs are not mine. So why do I need to get reactive in doing that? I don't want to be reactive. And what I want to do is to really care about myself and not accept the feelings and projections of others. Oh, this is a very good question. This is from Diane. Can you give an example of how or the reason why a system benefits from someone's frustration or anger? And that's a very, very good question, which takes me to the emotional and feelings life of emotional and feeling life and how it is paradoxical. There are negative feelings can have positive reasons and positive effects or benefits. Positive feelings can have negative effects and benefits. So that's one thing to remember. Just for example, the price of nice. Niceness can be very damaging to a system and to other people. It can hide the truth. It can be about denial. It can have all of those kinds of problems. And it also becomes an excuse to be real, an excuse to be not real. And so that nice can be a very negative thing. And frustration, or let's say, frustration or anger can be a positive thing. Let me give you a good example. Let's take just a good old dysfunctional family, and let's say an alcoholic family. How about we say that? And that there is a scapegoat in the family, or a black sheep or scapegoat in the family. And now everybody's angry with the scapegoat in the family. Let's say the child that's acting out, the teenager that's getting in trouble, is not making grades, whatever. Is the teenager who's a scapegoat angry? Yep, very angry. And so there's a lot of anger pinging all around the whole system. Now, how do you think that might benefit this system? I know the downside, it's miserable. Everybody's angry, and it really is very, very frustrating for the family to go through all that, and very painful and very energy draining. Now, let me tell you the good top side, the upsides. That anger keeps the focus off the main problem, which is the alcoholism. The anger, the child shoplifting, the child not getting good grades, it all serves a very important function in the family. that the family really doesn't want that to change. That's why when they come into therapy or come into work or come into coaches and they talk with people or come into treatment, they're very resistant, believe it or not, because they come in and say, hey, can you fix my child? Well, it's hard to fix your scapegoated child when the scapegoating is done to keep the focus off dad's alcoholism, which everyone denies. It's hard to fix your child that way. I can try, but boy, it's going to be tricky. And so that's an upside to frustration. Let me think of another situation in which you tell your parents, say the holidays are coming up, and they are coming up soon, and you've always gone to your parents, and you have your own family. You've always gone to your parents for Thanksgiving. And they say, now we're going to see you on Thanksgiving. We'll see you at Thanksgiving. And we're going to start getting ready to eat at about 11 a.m. And so we'll see you there. And then you go, well, Mom and Dad, we've kind of decided like we might want to have our own Thanksgiving dinner. Our children getting older. In fact, they have some spouses and stuff, and we'd like to have a tradition where we might do something like that at our house, and then we would come over after that. What? What? Well, that's stupid. I can't believe you're saying that. Now, as you making that request, you're starting to get frustrated. Well, what do you mean, Mom? That I don't think that's too big a thing to ask. What are you talking about? Do you have to be so crabby about this? Do you have to do that? And
wish I could stay longer, Jerry.
Okay. Hey,
sorry we didn't have more questions.
It's great. No, that's fine. I've got plenty I can talk about for the rest of the show.
Love you.
Love you too, Mark. So I'm now frustrated. And I feel angry with Mom and Dad because they're being totally unreasonable. They don't want to hear. They don't want to hear me having any kind of self-definition for the family or anything different than what we've always done. If I become frustrated, do you know that many times I'm more likely to give in? Because I don't want to feel the frustration. I don't want to feel the anger. So Mom angers me or frustrates me unconsciously. If she's a narcissist, maybe consciously, but most of the time unconsciously frustrates me. I feel angry, and now the status quo will be maintained. I'll go to my husband or wife and say, oh my gosh, Mom and Dad were just crazy. They were terrible, and I was so mad and frustrated. But we'll go to the dinner at 11 o'clock, and oh, it's so frustrating to deal with them. And so there's a positive side for the frustration and anger. It keeps the status quo going. That's why calmness is so important, because calmness doesn't get you caught back in the old status quo system where you will just give up because you want to stop feeling frustration and anger. And Mom and Dad have pinged you so that you will. And, I know your sister and two brothers are going to be there. So we have a little guilting going on. You're changing the family tradition. You're doing all that. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff going on inside of you. All of that is going on inside of you so that you will eventually give in and give up. So there is a positive side to the system for feelings of frustration, anger, guilt, shame. I always want to find out what the role, if someone feels shameful and they say, I really had a shame, I really had a shame bout, a shame episode with my mother. I had a client today and he's taking care of his parents, and he really had a shame episode. And then I go, well, I wonder what role that shame plays in the family and what role that shame plays in the family for him. How does that how does that make the family stay dysfunctional? Because all these feelings that we have are there to help the family continue to be dysfunctional and stay non-self-differentiated, stay enmeshed. And so what we want to do is to own those feelings, but not be owned by them. And that we remain calm so we can stay firm and in one place while the whole system is trying to give us while the whole system is trying to give us more pinging so that we will do what the system wants us to do. So that's partly, I think, I hope is a helpful answer, Diane, about these feelings that we have and how negative feelings can have an upside, positive feelings can have a downside. What I don't like? Somebody comes up and they are so sweet and syrupy and nice, I won't be able to trust them because they're too sweet, syrupy, and nice. And so I don't know what they're really thinking. So is niceness a positive, or does it play a role in the system that's negative? It plays a role in the system that's negative. Let's take another example, such as the mascot in dysfunctional families. Somebody who just brings humor, somebody who just laughs, somebody who entertains. Hey, there's nothing wrong with humor. There's nothing wrong with laughing. There's nothing, I like to be entertained. There are times I can even be jocular, and funny. But I don't want to do that out of anxiety or because I'm pinged. Because what will happen is, why do you think we have a mascot in alcoholic families? Because the mascot breaks the ice, keeps the focus over there with the mascot and the funny one, and and so it keeps it off the main problem of the severe codependence of mom and the severe alcoholism of dad. The mascot plays that role in a positive way, but with a negative outcome. It keeps the disease in place. I'd like to share with you now, if I could. Well, what do we do about self-abandonment? How do we reduce that? Are there some things we can think about to do that? Maybe some of these things you've heard before, some of these things you've heard me share before. I think, let me see if I think I might have, yeah, here we go. I want to make sure I don't forget these over here. Some of the obvious ones are, the best way to reduce self-abandonment is do the work of self-love, do the work of self-acceptance. Can you come to care about you? Can you really do that? Is that something you could be courageous about in caring about you? I think that's really important that we make that challenge to ourselves, that I am really going to love me. And I'll tell you, the worst thing you can do to a dysfunctional family is to get that family out of you by self-love and self-care. That's one way to get that family out of you. And self-acceptance is huge. And I'm going to talk about, in fact, I don't know whether I'll get to that because I want to talk about self-acceptance here in a moment in a little different way. Do the work of self-differentiation, taking the risk of autonomy, practicing detachment from unhealthiness, detachment and making attachment to healthiness. And people say, well, how do I practice detachment? And I've really I've really kind of shared some of those things in the past. There are some books like Jenny Brown's book, Growing Yourself Up, um, Andrea Schera, Schara, and the Your Mindful Compass, the Harriet Lerner books. Those all talk about how we can practice detachment from unhealthiness. And it's not easy. You can't just describe it in two sentences. Um, I suppose here's uh, it's the ability to separate, excuse me, the ability to be separate allows us to sustain our identity within a relationship. So it's that when we focus on our own identity and focus on self, that is allows us um, to be more separate from others, because we're not just a reactive self, we're an us self or a pro us self rather than a reactive self. Um, so we want to practice that. Then we want to practice, as I mentioned, emotional attachment to the self. Um, we want to practice emotional detachment with others, but also practice emotional attachment to self. If we do that, we will have greater attachment and detachment with other people. And you'll be able to connect more and be yourself more with other people if you can practice emotional detachment with others and emotional attachment to self. Because as I heard from a great supervisor I had, um, that the she said, you cannot have a close relationship without distance. And she was absolutely right. If you don't have distance, if you don't have a tennis net and a tennis court, if you don't have any distance, you can't have a close relationship. It will just be if a fused relationship or an enmeshed relationship. Work on your inner child or inner parts work. And there's some good books about the inner child work. You know, John Bradshaw's Homecoming, Charles Whitfield, Healing the Inner Child. There's many good inner child books out there that you can work on your parts inside and work on your child so you can get to know that child, love that child, care about that child, where the child just becomes integrated into you and he or she is not just crying and complaining and always is upset and reactive. I think that's really very important. Um, Stop focusing on the fear of abandonment and focus on attaching to yourself. Here's an example. A couple goes through a divorce. The wife comes to me and she fears abandonment, and it just almost paralyzes her. And she was very abandoned as a child by her father and by a previous husband. She's had lots of abandonment. And so we want to focus on attaching to ourselves. Here's a way to attach to yourself: telling yourself, don't worry, Jerry, I'll be there for you. Everything will be okay. My adulthood is going to take care of you. And so I'll be there for you. You're not going to be left abandoned. You may be abandoned by your husband who is going to become an ex-husband, but of this person who's fearing abandonment, but you're not going to abandon you. And I think that reassurance is an attachment to ourselves and self-care and self-love. And many people don't reassure themselves in that way. They just panic and go, well, I guess when I don't feel this abandonment, I won't feel this abandonment. Well, you can also focus on, okay, I'm feeling the fear of abandonment. How can I comfort my inner self in a way that I don't have to panic? I'm panicking right now, but I'm not going anywhere. And I remember having that thought and having that talk with myself. And I thought, I'm afraid I'm going to abandon me. And I've been afraid of abandoning me all my life because I have abandoned me all my life. Others abandoned me and I abandoned me all my life. And so, wait a minute, maybe I can, maybe I need to reassure myself that I'm not going anywhere. Little Jerry, I'm not going anywhere without you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to do right. I'm going to do well. And I'm going to take care of you. Whether anybody else does or not, I'm going to do that. I think another thing to work on that can be very important is the stop focusing on the fear of abandoning. Now, that's an interesting concept because I have a lot of clients who fear abandoning other people or that other people will feel abandoned if they are themselves. So they fear abandonment. If they step up and are authentic and be themselves, they fear the other person will feel abandoned by them. So it's a fear of abandoning. Now, it's a false fear. By the way, it may be true in that they may fear being abandoned. And they may feel abandoned, but it's not true that you are abandoning them. You are only attaching to yourself in a healthy way. That's not abandonment, but they are worried. Well, they're going to feel abandoned. And that's a part of our transference or projection in which we so fear abandonment that we make sure we don't abandon and we have a fear of abandoning. And so the codependent has a great fear of abandoning, a significant fear of abandoning. And so we go through preemptive worry, anticipatory anxiety about abandoning other people. And if you attach to you, if you attached to you and could never abandon yourself again, what would be the downsides? And I do the downsides work with other people. Excuse me, let me get a drink. I do the downsides with other people. And people, what would many people say? Well, if I attach to myself and never abandon myself again, I'd be great. Everything would be fantastic. No, it wouldn't. It would not be everything is fantastic. And you need to sort out how that could possibly be a downside if you attach to you and never abandon yourself again. Because my hunch is that would really, really challenge the relational systems that you're in. If you grew up in that way, if you matured in that way, that could really challenge those systems. Another way to avoid self-abandonment is to share and to see your faults and weaknesses with empathy. And I think that's very important because I have a lot of people who see their faults and weaknesses. They have no empathy for themselves. None. I'm just worthless. I'm just bad. I'm a horrible person. And, that's who I am. And I'm going, man, you don't have any empathy for you. And I'm not saying empathy as excuses. It's empathy for your weaknesses and faults. And that's why I will tell people, for example, if they say, well, I don't think, I so want to give up this guilt that I have in my family of origin. I always feel guilty. And then I say, well, why don't you accept that's where you're at? I am not ready to give up my guilt. And they go, well, I want to give up my guilt. I'm going, no, you're not ready to give up your guilt, and that's okay. Can you see your fault or weakness of not being ready to give up your guilt in an empathetic way? And go, oh, well, maybe I could love myself while not being ready. And maybe that might help you get ready to give up your guilt. And so I work with people in those ways. Uh, and, well, right. And we know if we don't attach to ourselves, we will transfer negative feelings and attitudes um, uh, to ourselves. In other words, if you don't have a healthy attachment to yourself, then you're going to have a negative attachment to yourself, because it's hard to have neither. It's only that we have either or, and often we've grown up with that negative attachment because we haven't had the positive. And so what's left is I'm attached to myself with a whip. I see myself as bad, and I always use this whip to beat myself. So it's either a positive attachment or a negative attachment. You choose. And I hope you choose wisely, because we do have a lot of that negative attachment to ourselves. And we do a lot of pointing at ourselves. We do a lot of very mean parts of ourselves to ourselves. But that doesn't have to be. I think another way is to look at and to identify the internal abandoners. In other words, this woman who was, her husband was divorcing her and going for another woman, which he had probably been having an affair with for some time anyway. And he wanted out of the relationship. He was certainly a narcissist, and she was feeling very abandoned. She had put a lot into the relationship, a lot into his business. She had stopped her own career so that he could be successful, and now it's all gone. So she feels abandoned. And so when we feel abandoned, or when we self abandon, we want to identify the internal abandoners. What abandonment am I reconnecting with? While it's this abandonment I'm feeling with this husband and this wife, but what is she connected to in terms of what's abandoning her inside her head and inside her heart? And I think that's important that we identify our internal abandoners. Who were they? What did they do? And are we clear about those? And do we see when they raise their heads? Do we hear when they start talking? And what are we going to do about those? And then lastly, though this is not an exhaustive list of all the things you can do in terms of reducing self-abandonment, but face the past traumas and abandonments while taking the adult you as your protector and your defender. And so again, I've worked with people in which they might present a feelings letter about how they felt about some abuse their parents had done and or are currently doing, and they're very angry and upset. But they then write this letter, and in our context where there's support and they're being listened to and they're being affirmed, they're bringing their adult to the session where they can talk about those traumas. And I reinforce the adult taking care of them and doing what they need to do for them. So we can always, well, and I think if you watch the video I have, which is, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. Going back and taking yourself, your adult self, back there with you to defend, heal, encourage, and protect you in a projective kind of fantasy way. But it's really not fantasy, because it's what's really happening inside of us. And if we can go back as the adult to to protect ourselves, to comfort ourselves, we can do that with ourselves now. And we can do that as adults. I would like to share with you that I have a number of videos up on my YouTube channel, Jerry Wise Relationship Systems. If you'd like to go there, subscribe to Family Tree's YouTube channel, subscribe to my YouTube channel, which I would appreciate. And then you will get a notice of all the new videos that come. You can also find me at www.jerrywiserelationshipsystems.com. If you'd like to work with me, you can, you can call me, you can email me. I think Renda or they will put up information about how to get a hold of me. I am planning to go on a trip soon to do a whole new video. The last video I did was an hour. One of the recent videos was an hour and 47 minutes on calmness is everything. I would recommend that to you. And then also circuit breakers in the relationship. That's another, that video is about how to self-differentiate more. And, but I'll be taking a trip next week and we'll be doing a new video, which will be on an exciting topic of social anxiety, family systems anxiety, and dealing with those kinds of things. I might even get 2 or 3 videos done, but I'm hoping to do that soon. And I hope that this evening has been a help to you. We did get to some questions tonight. Not 1,000 questions and not everybody's questions. I hope to do that more. And I really am appreciative of you being patient tonight and asking questions and participating. You can contact me if you want resources. I can send you resources that I can send out to you. I do have some pay-per-view videos on Vimeo. I think it's Jerry Wise On Demand. That you can take advantage of. And just like this eye position, in fact, I've got a whole bunch of old lectures that I've done that I'm going to pull out and digitize and make that available. I used to do conferences for social workers and for addictions professionals. I used to call it the stage 3 recovery. And stage 3 recovery is working on family systems approach to recovery. When I used to work in inpatient and outpatient alcohol, substance abuse treatment, and family systems. Well, again, I thank you all for being here tonight and being patient and enduring all of this. And it's been a great evening. I hope it's been a help to you, some of the things I've shared. Thanks again, and you have a great night.